Hello, I'm coming to you once again from my office in the Rayburn House office building across the street from the Capitol. I wanted to speak to you for a few moments today about all the conversations and activities that are taking place regarding the so-called fiscal cliff that we're headed toward. Actually, in my opinion, we went over the fiscal cliff many years ago when we ran our national debt to the horrendous, unbelievable amount that it is at this time, $16.3 trillion, and headed up faster than ever all the time. In fact, under the most optimistic scenarios, our national debt is going to go to well over $20 trillion over the next 4 years. In fact, Admiral Mullen, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, testified in front of the one of the Senate committees a couple of years ago, and he said the greatest threat to our national security is our national debt. I feel the same way. I want to make it real clear to everyone, though, that no one is trying to protect millionaires or billionaires, least of all me. All of the debates or discussions or the impasse that we presently are in, our fights are discussions over who is going to spend the money. Most conservatives feel that the most wasteful, least efficient, least economical way to spend money is to turn it over to the federal government. And that's been proven all over the world. In every country where governments have taken too much of a nation's GDP, either through taxation or corruption or both, the standard of living of the people has gone way down, and the gap between the rich and the poor has gone way up. The wealthy people seem to do all right in every country, even in socialist countries, but in countries where the people have allowed the government to get too big, or they've voted in big government, or they've had big government forced on them, then the gap between the rich and the poor grows tremendously, and you have a very few people at the top, a very few elitists at the top, and you slowly wipe out the middle class, and you have a huge underclass. The best way to help the poor and the lower income and the working people is to leave as much money in the private sector as possible so that people can invest and spend their money as they choose. That's the most efficient way. In fact, Edward Rendell, a liberal Democrat who was mayor of Philadelphia and then became governor of Pennsylvania, many years ago when he testified in front of the House Ways and Means Committee, he was having trouble with city government employee unions at that time. And he said government does not work because it was not designed to. He said there's no incentive for people to save money. So much of it is squandered. There's no incentive for people to work hard, so many do not. And that sort of summed up the situation that we're in here now. So much of what's turned over to the federal government is squandered through waste, fraud, and abuse. And so we need to leave as much money in the private sector as possible. We are discussing some increased revenues for the federal government, and I think that that will probably be in the end package. But I certainly would not be able to support any final agreement unless it had some significant and real spending cuts. I think almost everyone knows that we need to reduce federal spending, and many people have said, well, we need across-the-board spending cuts. I certainly would agree with that. You know, we can't talk, and we aren't talking about cutting Social Security or anything like that, but every department and agency could easily absorb a 5 or 10% across-the-board cut, but we won't pass something like that. But we've got to pass some significant reductions in spending, or we'll go right back into a recession, even worse than the one that we've just been through. We're having some decent economic movement right now, but most of that is based on pent-up demand, and it won't last unless we do the right things here in Washington at this time. Thank you.